Good morning. Sorry I was a few seconds late there. I had to spend some extra time in makeup this morning. It's a little extra scraggly, and I have something pretty close to right after class, so I needed to look my best. Uh, I hope you all had a wonderful weekend. Was trying to think back. I think I did. Uh, it was busy, and that's good. So welcome to CEM 3084. Have a couple of brief announcements. Well, it may not be as brief as we'd like, and then we're going to dive back into our introduction to financial statements, financial analysis, financial statement analysis, and so let's get right to the announcements this morning. Don't forget, heavens to Betsy, don't forget. We have a midterm coming up on Thursday, October 8th. Hard to believe October 8th is already here. Midterm exam. This exam is it's a little short of midterm actually, but it's midterm from the perspective of the instructional part of the class, and then the last part, as you may have, we didn't talk about this in detail at first day of class or so. The end of this class is yours. I don't know exactly how we're going to handle the presentations online. You get to do some. We'll talk about business plans, and you get to be entrepreneurial in spirit, at least for a time, and so that's at the end of the class. So the instructional part, this is about midtermish for that. Of course, I'm sure you're getting midterms coming up anyway. I would imagine. Now, I don't know. Again, I don't pay much attention really to what goes on in the Berg these days, but I would assume fall break is maybe fall break's Friday. It's always around Columbus Day, but we can't celebrate Columbus Day anymore, so they moved it to a Friday, which gives you guys probably not much of a break. So anyway, that's irrelevant. Midterm on Thursday. What does it cover? It covers what we've covered so far, except for this very last set of material on financial statements. So chapters 15, 16, and 17. Remember what's in those chapters? Chapter 15 is just pretty much basics, basic time value of money calculations, present value given a future, annuities given a present given annual amounts, all those sorts of things. So we moved money around. You should know how to do that. I believe there's going to be one question on the midterm it should be a gimme, and that question is about hey, here's a present value, find the annual equivalent, or here's an annual equivalent, find the future, something I don't remember, but it's something like that, very simple. And then we switched to chapter 17. Chapter 17 is economic decision making, how you make decisions, and the primary focus on that was mutually exclusive alternatives. Now, one thing that's not going to be asked on the midterm is, so here's a whole bunch of stuff, form the mutually exclusive alternatives. I don't trust myself to ask it in such a way that everybody completely understands what is being asked and what's not being asked. So anyway, that will not be on there. You don't have to worry about constructing mutually exclusive alternatives. You do have to worry about, I got a question coming up. You do have to worry about how you decide between mutually exclusive alternatives. I've got a question here that I'll answer in just a minute. I do have it in my notes. Thanks for the reminder, though. So that's chapter 17. And there is a question, there's at least one question about selecting from among a set of mutually exclusive alternatives. And remember, we talked about a set of performance measures that we use to make those decisions. We talked about finding the present worth. Well, first we talked about the MAR, the minimum attractive rate of return. And we said we were going to use that as the interest rate. And then we find the present worth of one of an alternative. And remember, we said if we find the present worth using the MAR as the interest rate and the present worth is positive, hey, that's a good investment. If it's negative, it's not necessarily a good investment. But also we had alternatives where all of the present worths were negative. And because some alternatives are not investments, but they're cost only. And my favorite example is HVAC systems. You don't include those in your construction plans to make well, the operation of an HVAC system, let's say, isn't done to make a profit. It's going to cost you. It only costs you. So the user of that system, it's cost only to them. So you have these alternatives that you examine. You can find the present worth of all of them and compare the present worths and pick the one that's the largest. You could look at the future worth of all of these alternatives and pick the one that's the largest. And you could find the annual worth of all these alternatives or annual equivalent and pick the one that's the largest. Any of those methods, typically, they all give you the same answer if you do them correctly. And all of those alternatives are typically generally acceptable. Remember, the one thing that we did, I did emphasize, at least I made an emphasis on it one time, and that is that if the lives of these alternatives, remember how long they last, if the lives of the alternatives are unequal, that is, maybe one alternative has a life of 10 years and one alternative has a life of 5 years and one alternative has a life of 7 years. If that's the case, then the only legitimate way to compare those is to compare them on an annual worth basis, an annual equivalent basis. And so you find the equivalent annual cash flow for all of those and compare those over their own respective lives also. So anyway, there's questions there. You're gonna have to find the best mutually exclusive alternative. That was primarily chapter 17. And then we skipped back to 16, and chapter 16 talks about how you finance operations by loans. So we looked at a whole bunch of stuff about loans, and we talked about typical payback over a period of time loans. We talked about different structures of loans, right? We had this example that we looked at where there were 3 different loan repayment plans. They're all economically equivalent. They're just structured differently. So in one plan, you paid no interest until the very end. And in one plan, you paid interest only. And in one plan, you paid equivalent amounts every month to pay back the loan. We looked at a home mortgage. How does that work? We asked such questions as, okay, we have a loan where we're paying equal amounts every period, and after you've made umpteen payments, how much do you owe? How much is left to pay back if you wanted to pay off this thing early? We talked about things like that. So we had homework problems asking those questions as well, and we talked about short-term loans, the interesting issue of short-term loans and how the lender discounts the interest, which means the lender takes the interest and charges it all up front. And typically that's simple interest, which means that you don't get a break as you pay off that loan. The interest isn't decreasing. The interest that gets charged isn't decreasing any, which is what makes it such a horrible experience. And the fact that it's charged up front. So we talked about those sorts short-term loans, and we solved problems, and we looked at, we had a homework problem about effective interest rate. Gee, what's your effective interest rate then? And I actually posted a video solving those problems. How to prepare for the midterm, and the questions are amazingly similar to homework questions. So if you did nothing but went through all the homework problems, you'd be reasonably prepared. If you went beyond and actually not only could maybe solve homework problems, but understood what you were doing when you solved homework problems, you'd be even better prepared. If you worked other problems in the back of the chapter that aren't homework problems and understood how to work those problems, you'd really be prepared. I think it's very much like the homework. If you are studying along here in the next couple of days and have questions, reach out to Mitch or reach out to me, and we'll be glad to help answer those questions for you. The test is a open book. How else could it be? How am I going to control that one? Open book, open notes, open resources. You can use resources that you wish to solve these problems, except flesh and blood, still warm human beings to ask for assistance. So none of that, but I encourage you to use Excel. I encourage you, the precision is important. At the very end, we can round it off. We don't have to worry about pennies, but getting up to that point, make sure you keep a whole lot of precision in your intermediate numbers, intermediate solutions. I think that's it's important that you get that, stick with that, because it can mount up and roll up and combine into quite an error if you round off all along the way. So don't do that. But again, use the resources, except for people, use the resources at your disposal to work on the midterm. It is, now let me get to this question, is yes, the midterm is going to be available for 24 hours. So Now, that doesn't mean you get 24 hours to do it. Sorry. So it will be to the best that I can figure this out. This is going to be on Canvas. It will open up at 8 a.m. on Thursday. It will be, you can open it up until it's closed at 8 a.m. on Friday. Once you go, click go, or whatever it is that you do, or download it, or activate it, or set off the alarms, whatever, you will have 75 minutes to take it. And then I think Canvas sets a timer, or there's some little gnome back there. They've got thousands of these little gnomes with stopwatches, and they set a timer, and you'll get 75 minutes to actually take the midterm. So make sure that you have your resources and you're isolated in a nice, peaceful, quiet place. Don't be taking this at Starbucks, or I don't even know if you can go to Starbucks these days, but Starbucks or the library, or well, maybe the library, you could, if you found some corner off in the substratus basement sphere somewhere. But make sure that you're not going to get any interruptions. Turn off your phone and put it in the refrigerator or something, and just focus on taking the test. You will have 75 minutes. You don't get an additional time. You don't take it for a while and then take a break and then come back. This is should be treated just like sitting in a classroom for 75 minutes. And if it were me, and I know it's not, if it were me, I'd take it at 8 o'clock Thursday morning and sit there for 75 minutes, just like class time, except you won't be bored like class time. You'll be actively working on this thing. And then at 9:15, you'd be done. That's what I would do. But your schedules are different. Maybe you don't function well at 8 o'clock, and in which case you want to take it at a different time. So you'll have that 24 hours. Do not, I don't know how this works. I don't know what had happened if you started taking it Friday morning at 7:30. If at 8 o'clock you got to be done, or if it would give you the whole 75 minutes. That's a detail I really don't care about. Except for you, I don't want you to wait till the last minute and try squeezing it in and get shut down. And remember, this Canvas stuff, hold on a second here. Remember this Canvas stuff. This is, I don't know where the gnomes sit with their stopwatches, but even though things happen at the speed of light or close to it, that doesn't mean, prepare for glitches. Prepare that you might think you've got 2 minutes left and it's only 1 minute. Don't push the limits of the technology. Expect the technology to shut you off before you expected. So do not say, oh my gosh, I didn't get it uploaded in time, or whatever that situation is. Don't, let me see, let me be gruff from it. Don't give me that stuff, right? Plan to at the 70th minute mark, plan to be done, to submit it. Even if you're not finished, don't take a chance that you won't get it submitted, and then trying to argue your way out of, gee, I was right there on the last question and I lost track of time. don't lose track of time. Maybe you should keep your phone in your room and turn off the ringer, but set the alarm to tell you to stop well ahead of time. So, the beauty is that you get to be in a place where you can work on the midterm in an environment where you're comfortable, and you can create that environment, and you have all these tools available to you. That's the beauty. That's the upside. The downside is you're bound by this fence, and it's not in a classroom where I can see you working and I can see you uh, plugging away, and I can see the time ran out and you were still writing, and you get that extra grace period to finish your sentence or whatever that is. That doesn't exist. It doesn't exist here. So there's no tolerance. If you don't get it turned in time, you didn't take it. That sounds mean, but we got to take the bad with the good here with the technology we're using. So do not. I'll do my best not to mess it up, and you do your utmost. Matter of fact, do more than that. Make sure you don't mess it up on your end, timing wise. Now, you're all adults. You understand that in your head. Now, we just all need to make sure that we execute that when the time comes. So, sorry for the lecture, but I just want to I want you to do very well. I think you should do. Most of you will do very well on this. You shouldn't be scared of it. If you're getting it, you're going to be fine. But I don't want you to mess up on a technicality of the technology, and I care a whole lot about that. I don't care about. I'm not much for excuses, but I do care that you do a good job on the midterm. So there we go. I hope that answered. If you have any other questions, you can type in the chat. Would be the easiest way. I'll be glad to address those. How many questions will be on the test? I think right now there are 6 questions. Now that they're not all equal point values, and I'm going to put a bonus question on there too, just to for those who finish the others on time and would like get some extra points there. So there'll be more points available than the 100, but 6 questions right now. I've been communicating with Mitch. He had a draft of the midterm. He suggested maybe, I don't know that we'll do this, but maybe it could stand an additional question. So we'll see if we do that. But 6 right now, 6 questions. One of them it will probably be like 30 points worth. You can imagine that I'll go ahead and spill my guts. You can imagine that the mutually exclusive alternative question might take longer than the others because there's more calculations perhaps, and it's a little bit more involved. So that one would be worth more points. There'll be one of those, and then there will be 1 or 2 that are, like there is a question from chapter 15 that should take you a minute. If you're using Excel, maybe less than a minute. If you're not using Excel, maybe 2 minutes, because you might have to look up some interest factors. So short ones, long ones, 6 right now, maybe as many as 7. So if it's 7, that gives you 7 minutes. I'm sorry. Typically math, I'm pretty good with mental math. That gives you 10 minutes on average per question. So considering the kinds of problems we face, that's pretty good, I think. I will do my best to keep an eye on the chat box here, and which probably goes away at sometimes. Um, but I'll keep an eye on there. And if you have questions, you think of them as we're going along, feel free to pop up, shoot me a question there. I do have we're still in announcements. I still have another announcement here, which is maybe neither here nor there for most of you, but for those who are having difficulties with the videos, maybe buffering a bit or not being too agreeable, I finally, yeah, and finally is the right word, finally figured out and have uploaded a number of the more recent videos, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 videos to my YouTube channel. So I have a playlist for this class, CEM 3084 Construction Economy, I think is the name of the playlist. So on YouTube, I don't know if you pop into YouTube and you search for Kelling, turns out there's a lot more Kellings in the world than you could ever imagine. And I mean, I always thought I was unique, and I'm not. It's kind of sad. Anyway, and you know, do Kelling 3084 or CEM 3084 all together one, or I think I'm various places. I'm either Charles Kelling or Patrick Kelling. I am Charles Patrick Kelling, but my dad's Charles, so I'm Patrick. But a lot of places want your first name. Some of you experience that. You know what I'm talking about. So I'm not sure exactly how it's listed. Haven't paid that much attention to that part. But the videos are up there, and I will be placing the videos as they're recorded, and as I put them on Canvas, I'll also maybe not as quickly, but I will also get those up on YouTube so you can watch them. And if you've been having difficulties, I hope that addresses the difficulties. If it doesn't, then we know that it's a recording problem and not a viewing problem. So anyway, so that's also available. They're all on there. Also, if you search, you might find some very old engineering economy videos. Me sitting by the pool out in Arizona in I think it was in July, so it was stinking hot. I love it. I love Arizona. I love the dry heat out there. It's just like sitting in a sauna. It's great. So anyway, that's the announcements. And again, I'll keep an eye on the chat to the best I can without a producer. And I want to move on to class material now, because this will be on the final, and this will be on the next quiz that we have, which is not for a couple more weeks. So after the midterm, we'll all need to lick our wounds and take a break a little bit. So we need to get back to the material that we were discussing. I was discussing anyway, last Thursday, which is financial statements. One last, if you haven't seen the announcements on Canvas, the solutions for homework, the last homework are posted. You know, I said homework 3, I think it's 3. Is it 4? It's 3. Anyway, posted up on Canvas in the files homework problems folder, and you can look at the solutions. It's an Excel file. It's not an active Excel file. That is the answers. You can't see how I found the answers. That's for you to figure out. I don't want to just hand you the midterm on a silver Excel platter, so you'll have to build those yourself. So anyway, here we go. Let's, I'm gonna share my screen, and we're gonna get back to looking at financial statements here. Let's see what I've got. Now, I don't want you to worry about this at this point now, and it's really not a difficult assignment. You could worry about it and do it while you're watching somebody play some sport on some channel sometime. Uh, because if you look at chapter 6 and you look at this assignment, you'll see that they look very familiar and similar. Uh, but remember, we were starting to talk about ratios, and we had our excuse me, we had our in-class assignment, which we're going to be looking at some of the numbers today, time permitting, and then we will be looking at those more next. Whoops, hitting my equipment here. Next Tuesday, when we get back after the midterm. But and so don't worry about the assignment now. It'll be due sometime later. We had a balance sheet. Remember, we said that the balance sheet was a snapshot in time of a collection of financial activities that go on during that time period. You could construct a balance sheet really for at any time. You could stop the presses and build a balance sheet. And so usually you compare 1 year to the next, or you compare well, typically it's 1 year to the next, and it's backward looking until we get to pro forma analysis that we'll get to here maybe next Thursday. I'm thinking maybe Tuesday, but maybe next Thursday. We look at pro forma analysis where we will look at this year and projections for the coming year, which is very important to do. So we have, remember, the basics of a balance sheet are assets equal liabilities. And so you get all your current assets and you get all your current liabilities, and you come down to the end, you'll notice that there's your total assets, 1 million, total liabilities, 1 million. They're the same down to the dollar, and they'd be the same down to the penny. And so there's your balance sheet. You could construct your own personal balance sheet. You have cash on hand, you have accounts. You probably don't have accounts receivable unless somebody owes you money. And maybe for some of you, that's how you're working your way through college. I don't want to get into that level of detail here. I don't want to go meddling into your affairs. You might have some assets. You might have one of those giant crummy 20-year-old couches, maybe a sectional where you flop down and you and your friends flop down. I'm thinking guys here, just because that's what I am. And beer stains and stuff like that. You might have a vehicle that you own. So you have some assets, and you might have liabilities. Certainly you have rent to be paid. So you had those might be accrued rent. We'll talk about some of those words later. And you might have something you're paying off, a car loan or credit card or student. You're probably not paying on your student loans yet. I don't know really anything about student loans. I didn't have them, and for better or worse, I saved up, and my kids didn't have them. So you have all these liabilities. You got current ones and long term that you have to pay off. The current, we got to pay these this year. Long term, longer term, more than 1 year. And then we have the owner's equity, retained earnings, and the equity is like your net worth. So you could build a balance sheet and you could look at what your net worth is. And it's probably, for most of you, the overwhelming majority, if not all of you, it's not much right now. Your net worth is just not much. But the good news is that the older you get, the more you work, the more you accumulate. You don't want to accumulate too much. But on the financial side, the more you save and invest and earn and things like that, your net worth will rise, and pretty soon you'll be up there hopefully you'll be up there with retirement time. So that's balance sheet. And then we talked about the income statement, which is kind of like a movie. It keeps track of things that happen over time, over the year typically. And you can look at all the costs, all the revenues that you receive for the work that you've done, and then the various costs that you have. And typically, with for construction organizations, you have construction. You break it out into operations costs of construction, the actual construction costs, and you have equipment costs. And then we talked briefly about things like the gross profit, the overhead, and the net profit, profit before taxes, EBIT, remember, earnings before interest and taxes, and then EBITDA, interest before earnings, before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And that you should know what amortization means, right? Based on what we talked about. That was chapter 16, right? We had a mortgage amortization schedule, paying it off over time. There's a term here I said we were going to talk more about later, and we do. I think it's chapter 5. Don't quote me on this. Where depreciation is something that's very important to know. If you have equipment, you have to understand depreciation and its effect on your business, on your taxes, on your accounting. So that's where we were, and we looked at some of these ratios that are on this sheet that we're gonna tackle here in just a minute. So allow me to go back and share the where we were on the PowerPoint, and then I guess we're almost to break time here. We were looking at the different kinds of ratios that were important, and just as a reminder, we were looking at these ratios, different types, collections, groups of ratios that indicate the particular condition of the organization. So we had activity ratios, which is, did you put your assets to work effectively? Are you making them work for profit purposes, for earning purposes? Then we had liquidity ratios. Do you have enough money, right? To can you generate enough cash quickly enough to continue to reinvest and to make sure that you're paying your bills? So you know when you have let's say with equipment, you have fuel and you have maybe office equipment, and you have electricity bills and water bills, you have fuel bills, you have these people actually want to get paid, and they want to get paid on time, and sometimes they'll shut you off if you don't pay them. And so you need cash. That they want to get paid, and they want to get paid in cash. They don't want to get paid with an IOU or maybe they'll take getting paid with a credit card, but that's then paying debt with debt. Don't get into that mess. So you need cash. Liquidity ratios will help you. This quick ratio, current ratio, things like that are liquidity ratios. Solvency ratios is where we're going to briefly talk about those here in just a second. Are you going to stay in business, right? Can you satisfy your debt obligations? This is debt, not necessarily paying off your water bill and your fuel bill. This is debt that you have incurred. You have borrowed money from a lender, and you need to pay it back. So those are solvency ratios. If you don't pay those back, and the creditors are lined up at the door, the ability to stay in business is, let's say, that's hindered greatly. You don't want that. So we have a lot of solvency ratios that we can look at. And then there's profitability ratios. Hey, are we making money? What ratios can you look at to see that we are not only making money, but effectively, efficiently, quickly, um, um, to the best of our financial ability, making money? And are we making as much as we should make? Um, we'll talk a little bit later about margin, what margin means, and how all those are related. So these ratios are the ratios that we were examining when we took off last Thursday, and we were in the middle, I think. I didn't go back and look at the video. Uh, uh, we were talking about solvency ratios. So, so here's this different solvency ratios, and again, you all can look at these things. I don't need to drag this out unnecessarily. Uh, but these solvency ratios, all sorts of different, so debt to equity, how, equity, owner's equity, shareholders equity, um, is how much money people have in cash, how much is invested in this organization. So, and that is, if this is public, you have a shareholder, a price of the shares of the stock, how many shares are out there, what's the price of share, multiply them, add them all together, and what do you got? Total shareholders equity. And so if your debt is greater than all that equity, that's a maybe a lot of debt. You don't want that. Then you owe more than people have invested in your company. Well, that happens at a startup phase. You're way in deep, but maybe you get a lot of investors, but you still may be in deep. So a lot of these ratios, it depends on the stage of the organization. Are you a startup? Are you a, um, a proprietorship? Are you a LLC, limited liability corporation, or a limited liability partnership? Or have you been in business for 20 years? What industry are you in? You all be in the construction industry by and large, most of you. So what these should look like varies over the life of the organization and the type of the organization that you have. But each one tells a story on, can you pay your bills with the solvency ratios? Are you going to be able to pay these bills? Do you have enough money? Do you have too much debt? Are you carrying so much debt that servicing that debt, that is paying the interest, the payments, and everything, servicing that debt becomes an overwhelming burden on the organization? Coverage ratios are, look at the denominator here: interest payments, and lease payments, interest payments. So all these things are covering these obligations that aren't really paying off debt. It's just paying interest and lease sorts of things. So and let me also tell you, and as you'll notice when you get into chapter 6 and when we get into this in-class exercise, there are a lot more ratios, certainly, than we see on these slides here. These are examples of more popular ratios, but there's a lot of different sorts of ratios. You could create your own ratio that tells you a story about your organization. You may be you may have a very unique approach. You may build a company. You may be entrepreneurial in nature, and you want to start your own business, and it's going to be unique in the way that you either produce your product, or you address your customers, or any number of different things. And therefore, things may be important to you that are not important, maybe even to a competitor, but aren't important to other people in their companies. And so you may have to form your own ratio that tells you, that really at a glance, you can see, bingo, I see what's going on here. And it's great, or it's a problem. It's like, think of all these ratios as, you're piloting a 777, or a 787. Don't do a 737 Max. Let's not go there. But you're piloting a large commercial aircraft, and you have a dashboard that tells you how your plane's doing, and these ratios are the different instruments on your dashboard. And as you manage and run your organization, you know what information you need on your dashboard to keep that plane flying, to keep your organization functioning properly. And so your dashboard may look a little bit different than your competitor's dashboard, or somebody in a different industry, what their dashboard looks like. And the good news, if you run your own organization, is you get to build your own dashboard. But make sure that you build your dashboard. Otherwise, I don't know if crash and burn is the right analogy maybe here, right? So you have to make sure that you spend time. This isn't time you want to spend. Your interest is in construction. Your interest isn't in finance. But with the help of your financial folks, financial officer, if you have one, accountants, certainly, you need to make sure you pick the right dashboard. Okay, enough of that. Let me jump here, and then we'll take a break here in a second. Uh, Profitability ratios. So here's margin. Margin is how much of that revenue turns into profit. So you have all this revenue up front, and then you have profit at the bottom. That really is, you'd like for your margin to be quite large, right? Because that is the percent of revenue that turns out to be profits. You want a large margin. You don't want a thin margin. Thin margins happen in a lot of industries. As I understand, I haven't seen it personally, but I understand grocery stores work on a very thin margin, right? They make very little profit on each item, but they work on volume. So volume is what creates their total profitability, not profitability on an individual item. Those are thin margins. You want fat margins. And the return, is the rate of return. So it's the profit divided by the investment. So you get that ratio, of course, is your rate of return, your return on investment. And there are the profitability ratios, and we'll just briefly go through some of these profitability ratios after we take a small break. Let me see, where's my clock? It's 8:48, and let me stop sharing right there so I can get to all the good controls. We'll take a break until 8:53, and during the break, if you have don't forget, if you have questions or anything particularly about the midterm or anything, feel free to chat it in the chat box. And now we're delayed to 8:54, so I will be back online at 8:54. Okay, back to it. That didn't seem those 5 minutes go by fast. I don't know if they go by quickly for you or not, but I barely get time. I seems like to walk to the microwave and goose my coffee a little bit, and I was checking on a way to uh, print the participant list. I don't see how to do that, so hopefully there's somewhere I can know all of you all who are here, and not to embarrass anyone, Morgan gets a prize for the first on today, early this morning before 8. It's like 10 till or quarter till or something. But I wanted to say I appreciate all of you being on. Many of you are incredibly consistent because your name pops up here. I'm not sure why your name pops up specifically on my screen. I don't know if you make a noise or something, but I really appreciate. I know that for most students, an 8 o'clock is not it's not prime, and so I sincerely appreciate you, all of you, and again, I just recognize a lot of names every time we're on, and and I appreciate you participating live and being on. And I've said a lot about the midterm, and there's a lot of students probably who are consistently not on, and I hope they get the word about the midterm. I don't want them to be disadvantaged, but at the same time, it's 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 kind of them who are disadvantaging, as some would say they're self disadvantaging themselves. So anyway, enough of that. Let's get back to the class material, which is back here on these profitability ratios. I'm going to have to hang on here. I just got to close a windows covering stuff. I couldn't see what I was doing. So these are the different margin ratios, and when it says margin ratio, it's just talking about profitability and how are we doing profit wise. And these you can see that these seem very natural. Okay, what's our profit over our revenue? That's a gross profit margin. That's gross profit. Then you have an operating profit margin, which looks at a different kind of profit, right? After you've taken out a few more expenses. And net profit margin, yet again. So if we started at the top here and we went down, each of these margins naturally gets smaller because the numerator gets smaller each time, while the total revenue, the denominator, stays the same. And then we get down here to the bottom, pre-tax profit margin. So there's earnings before taxes, and some would add before interest and taxes there. That's EBIT, EBIT, earnings before interest and taxes. This would be EBT, earnings before taxes. And taxes sometimes, there are ways, when you hear companies, I can't remember the terminology, the phraseology, taking advantage of the system of not paying the right taxes, not paying their fair share. First of all, let me just say that most companies, all the ones that I know of, now I don't have any mob friends that I know of, so most all companies that I'm aware of pay their fair share of taxes. What they do is they utilize the uh, tax the tax breaks, the tax deductions, the tax structure in the income tax system. Um, so if somebody doesn't like that, what kind of advantages or breaks they're getting, typically you need to look to the legislation that created the tax system and find out, that's where the creation of the system is what you might disagree with, not the application of the current laws to your business. You are going to want to minimize your tax burden. I promise you, personally and professionally, you want to pay the taxes that you should pay, and and you want to avoid the taxes that you can legally avoid, because your business, maybe your profitability might depend on it. So, and we'll talk about taxes a little bit more later. But certainly taxes for a lot of companies, particularly if you're a sole proprietorship, you get taxed on your individual income. All of your stuff is included in that way, and so you could be your tax burden can be significant, and you want it to be not as significant. Here's some more ratios. Um, Now, these, as opposed to the margin ratios earlier, these are return ratios. So this is what about your and income. Notice that this. Let me go back. Um, Sorry, my brain froze up for a minute. Notice that we're going to start looking at um, uh, ratios. With some of these ratios that we've looked at already, and the ones we're looking at here, it comes to my mind to mention that we have. We're going to be looking at uh, ratios that include numbers from the balance sheet and numbers from the income statement. And when you do that, you have to do some special things sometimes, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about those special things you have to do, and typically it's averaging numbers that are on your balance sheet last year to this year. Since you have ratios, if they contain data numbers from the income statement, remember that's a movie, that's over time, and so you don't want to include in that ratio a fixed number from a snapshot. You want to include in that number, if if you have something that's happened over a period of time, you take the average of what the situation was at the front end and what it was at the back end, and take the average, and that's the number that you include in the ratio when you have, kind of moving numbers and static numbers. And we'll see how that works um, a little bit later. So again, here's the return on assets. You can look at all of these ratios. Some of them are just a little bit different, but the ones that are just a little bit different, the good news is that you can identify what made the difference, right? So let's this slide isn't necessarily uh, a good example of that. We'll see some later. I'll bring it out. I'll mention that these ones that are almost the same, just a little different. Really, it's really nice to compare those, because then you can see it's that one little difference in those that's making the difference in the ratio. You can point to a particular number that is either a problem area or is doing very well for you. It's much like, here's a personnel management tip for you. When you assign, if you're a manager and you assign responsibilities around, you want you don't want to assign something necessarily to a group. And this is one of the issues. And if you've done teamwork, worked in teams in school, you've already experienced this. And that is that in truth, you can't have the entire group accountable. That doesn't work. To effectively manage, you want a friend of mine used the term one throat to grab, and that is you want a person to go to when things go south, right? When there's a problem, you can't. It's hard to discipline a whole group. You want one person accountable, one throat to grab uh, for an issue. As a manager, you want that. Now, it can make for unpleasant meetings, right? But as a manager, I promise you, there will be unpleasantness in your life and on the personnel side. So my point is that these ratios where there's just that little difference kind of gives you that one throat to grab. One, for sure that your problem or your one element of your business that's going quite well. Okay, there are all kinds of other ratios, and there they are. There's one. Um, basic earnings per share, diluted earnings per share. Diluted is you probably don't need to know this, but when if you have a bunch of shares outstanding, and diluted would be you've got some organizations have common shares, common stock, and then they have preferred stock, which may pay a dividend, certainly might get a dividend before common stockholders get a dividend. So you have preferred stock. Well, quite often that preferred stock can be converted to common stock. And so when you see diluted, that is considering that all of those that can be converted to common stock are converted to common stock. And you get a different number for your earnings per share. The basic earnings per share EPS is going to have a denominator that's just the common stock, and diluted is that denominator is going to include everything that can be converted to common stock is going to be included in that. So that means that I, as a shareholder, my shares are diluted. They're worth a little bit less because all these other Johnny come lately preferred stockholders, what if they converted into common shares? It just makes my share worth less because there's more common shares for the same equity. It's never going to show up on a test, so for at least in this class. So don't worry about that. Then you've got book value per share. That's how much are you worth. The book on the books, that's value on the books isn't the be all and end all, but it is important. PE, you might have heard of somebody's PE, price to earnings, PE ratios. So those are all once again can be useful, and there are even some others that pop up in chapter 6 of the textbook. Now this is we're going to look at ratios. I guess maybe we'll get time to look at one today. Get time to look at one today. And then we're going next Tuesday to pro forma analysis. I hope we'll get to this next Tuesday. We're going to look at a bunch of ratios. We will get to it. Pro forma analysis is where you start making your estimates. So that's why the big arrow on this slide here, where we start making some estimates, and you have actually done this. You haven't thought about it when you did it, but this we'll formalize it here next Tuesday, and we will formalize what a pro forma analysis is these things that you've done automatically in your head, it's in some sense kind of prepping for the future, does have a formal structure that we can discuss and then exploit that structure to actually conduct the pro forma analysis. And we'll be doing that on next Tuesday. I have already posted on Canvas a set of slides for pro forma analysis. So we'll get there. We'll get there next Tuesday. The last thing that I'd like to do is go back to the in class and just to look at some of these ratios, and let's do them. And we're not going to do much. We're going to do very little, actually, because we don't have time. But for example, quick ratio. What is the quick ratio? And I would write this down. Hope I don't have enough room here on my desk to make all this happen. So I'm going to say this, and then I'm saying it now in words, and it'd be better if I had these words in front of you. But at 10 after 9, we're not gonna. I'd be flipping around cameras and stuff like that, and I wouldn't have time to do it. Here's the numerator of the quick ratio. The numerator is cash. So the quick ratio is, gee, how can I get my hands on stuff, right? It's if I had to generate as much cash as I could, as quickly as I could, how much could I get my hands on from the company, right? And that would consist of cash, and add in short-term investments. That's, hey, I can cash out of this investment very quickly, right? And then receivables. So these receivables would be people are paying me back for things, right? Those are the accounts that I have receivable. And so the numerator is cash plus short-term investments plus receivables. Get my hands on money very quickly. And that's a numerator. The denominator is current liabilities. Current liabilities are, I need to pay these off, current. So these are the liabilities I have currently, not long-term liabilities, just the current for this year, typically. So if we look at this, that sounds like balance sheet stuff, and it is. And so we can go up here and we can say cash, okay? So for the current year, let's do current year, $200,492. And then accounts receivable and short-term investments. Well, there's our accounts receivable. We're not going to include retention here. We'll talk about retention later. You may already know that retention was a new term to me. We're not going to include that. So accounts receivable, and there is no category here for short-term investments. So that zeroes out in our numerator. We'll take cash and we'll add accounts receivable. So the total there is going to be somewhere around $603,000. That's the numerator. Then the denominator is current liabilities. So we'll skip down here to total current liabilities, $423,907. So that's 603 divided by 424 about, and that ratio turns out to be about 1.42, and that's our quick ratio, right? Quick ratio. Go back down here. Quick ratio 1.42. Now, you're thinking, okay, 1.42, and what does it tell you Well, we don't know right now. 1.42 means, hey, you've got enough cash to pay your current liability. It's greater than 1, so you can pay your current liabilities from all this stuff. Is 1.42 good enough? Does it need to be 1.9 or 2, or we don't know. So we're going to talk more about ratios next time, and we'll dig into some more details. I'll have an assignment for you that you don't need to worry about any homework or assignment right now. I want you to prepare and do excellent on the midterm. I wish you the best on the midterm. You won't see me Thursday morning. There's no class going on. Strictly midterm. It'll be available on Canvas. I will communicate with you between now and then how to proceed, and I hope that you do incredibly well. Don't forget to reach out to Mitch or to me. In the meantime, if you have questions about the material, study hard, make your folks proud, and I wish you the best. Have a great rest of this whole week. Have a great weekend. Enjoy things outside of class, and I will be back on next Tuesday morning. So good seeing you today. Have a good week.